Multilateral Development Banks, or MDBs. We're discussing MDBs at G20 Summit in India at a time when there are questions being raised on the relevance of something like the World Bank. How many development projects in emerging economies are the World Bank funding? Is there enough coming out from IMF to support, or does the world, especially the global South, have to be dependent on the IMFs and the World Banks of the world?
You're right, Krishna. So I think it's definitely a very contentious issue. And again, India is using this opportunity of being the president of G20 at a time when Prime Minister Modi, even at the BRICS summit, has been really talking about this emergence of the global South, right? And this global South sort of coming together and standing up as an equal to the Western powers that be. So at a time when this global South emerges, there are questions being asked on the relevance, the scale, and the sort of viability of World War II vintage institutions called the Bretton Woods institutions like the World Bank or the IMF. And there are many more. I think there are some 31 or so multilateral development banks, right? So this whole multilateralism is in question right now, where the angst really comes from the fact that these are Western created concepts looking at funding development in emerging markets. These emerging markets being Asia and Africa, North Africa, mostly North and East Africa. And the fact that, these are loans being sanctioned for development without really taking into account the global development goals, the GDGs, not just the SDGs, which are the Sustainable Development Goals, right? So there are global development goals around poverty eradication, around dealing with hunger, around dealing with digital development, digital sort of, transmission across the world, and penetration of digital technologies the world over. And the consensus right now seems to be that these multilateral development banks are not being able to do the kind of justice that they were supposed to do for the emerging markets and for African and Asian economies when they were set up in the 1940s. Now, add to this the geopolitical tension around China, thus far acting as a multilateral development bank on its own accord. So look at the kind of funding or debt it has given to a country like Sri Lanka, or the kind of ports Pakistan, or the ports that it controls in Africa, right? So there is this unilateralism with China and this multilateralism with the MDBs, and India now wanting to emerge as a leader of the global South and fighting the battles of the emerging economies, saying that there needs to be this entire restructuring of debt, and there has to be an equal stake, equal participation on the countries which are receiving this debt, and they need to have a say on how this debt will be repaid and what this debt should eventually be used for. So it should not be China, or it should not be these established multilateral development banks which instruct the countries which are receiving this loan to invest them only in a certain projects which are of interest to them.
Right.
That's where we are.
That's where we are. And of course, this is going to be discussed at the G20 Summit. So I think this is the beginning, India in a sense sort of initiating this discussion, and hopefully we have results to show after the G20 Summit is done, and maybe the first ever India-led MDB can take place in the future. We wouldn't know, but we're a long way away. But I'm happy that the conversation is happening. I'm happy that the relevance of the IMF and World Bank are finally being questioned thanks to the rise of the global South, thanks to the incredible rise of India as a global power. But with that, Kartik, I'm afraid this conversation can go on for another hour or two, but we have completely run out of time here on this morning's edition of Business Plus. Thank you, Kartik, and thank you, Amit, for taking time out to be with us. It's a wrap here from my side. This is Krishnakumar signing off. Keep it with News 9.